Hello everyone, this is POW Ponder on Weather. In this update, we've got a major pattern shift with rounds of severe weather and snowstorms, followed by an Arctic blast late next week. Good morning everyone, happy Friday out there. I'm getting an early start this morning. It is literally 5:24 in the morning. I got a lot of things to do today, but yeah, let's check out the overall radar setup this morning of our main players that's going to be setting the stage for our major pattern shift. We've got rain. Yes, we're talking rain right now into portions of Los Angeles, into Southern California, back into portions of San Jose where they desperately need the rainfall. There's a second piece of energy up here by Seattle that's bringing some rain showers for them. Those two mechanisms underneath that, this is the setup. So we've got these two main players, one diving down here off the west coast into Southern California. This piece of energy is going to be pushing eastward over the next several days. That's going to be creating a severe weather threat into portions of Iowa. And then we have this second setup, this little short wave, that's going to be diving southward as well, but that's going to move a little bit further south and be creating a secondary setup over portions of into the Arctic. So let's take a look at these different setups. So first of all, this low-level jet will become really active by the time we get into Saturday afternoon time frame. Once it gets into portions of Missouri into Iowa, it will lift. It has that vertical lift associated with it, and that is going to be setting the stage along that kind of a triple point dry line setup over portions of Iowa. And take a look at the photographs. That's an indication of some vertical shear that's going to be associated with this particular setup. It's got a lot of lift with it, and the atmosphere, unfortunately, is going to be rotating, setting the stage for a possible isolated tornado threat as well into portions of Iowa, getting into Missouri. In fact, the Storm Prediction Center has highlighted that particular area coming out of Nebraska here, heading into Iowa and into portions of Wisconsin with that marginal to slight risk for severe weather. And yes, you do have about a 5% chance of an isolated tornado into portions of Iowa, getting into portions of Wisconsin. But don't just be fixated just on the brown shaded area, but you could still get on the tail end of that atmosphere, still going to be rotating into portions of Missouri. So definitely be on a lookout as we get into that Saturday afternoon, late Saturday evening time frame with some higher wind gusts and some very heavy rainfall. So here is the setup as we get into that late afternoon going into the early evening time frame. We've got right here along that triple point here going over the portions of Iowa. These storms are going to be racing pretty fast, so we could be looking at some stronger storms starting to break out into the afternoon hours, 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and these will be racing across. And to the north of there, that's going to be your snow. That's on the northwest side of there. It's going to be breaking out of that heavier snow. So once this system moves inland, that'll set the stage and cause the lift in the Intermountain West for the snow to start breaking out over into Nevada, get into portions of Salt Lake City, into portions of Wyoming. That'll eventually hit the Rocky Mountains here, and then the snow will be heavier into portions of South Dakota as well, and then I have a kind of a mixed precipitation with some icy setups, not terribly too much ice, but still cause trouble on the roadways and to portions of Wisconsin here as well as Minnesota. So as we move through time, there's the warm sector to the south. So here's the initial setup with that secondary low-level jet. As we get into that Sunday, March the 6th time frame, you're still well into the warm sector in parts of Texas here, Louisiana, into the Arctic, and that clash is going to be setting the stage for that second round of severe weather with that second piece of energy. That second low-level jet will be racing across, bringing some very high winds with it in its path. And then as we get into that Saturday afternoon, late Sunday afternoon, late Sunday evening time frame, into portions of eastern Oklahoma, the Arctic, into southern Missouri here, those could be also setting the stage for another round of severe weather with that secondary lift. So into portions where the Storm Prediction Center has highlighted just a kind of a thunderstorm risk on the tail end, the very tail end of portions of central Texas. Once you get into the Dallas-Fort Worth area, it starts to become a little bit, on the stronger side, but it's still going to be fairly capped in this particular atmosphere within Dallas. But once you hit into northeast Texas, getting into portions of southeastern Oklahoma, especially into Arkansas, into Missouri, that atmosphere is a lot less capped and will be able to cause those thunderstorms to rise and turn severe, and those will also pose an isolated tornado threat, a damaging wind threat, and a large hail threat as well. So definitely be on the lookout, especially as we get into that late Sunday afternoon, getting into the overnight hours on Sunday night. So as we move through time and go through that Monday morning, there's the heavier rain will be shifting into portions of northeast Texas, getting into portions of Oklahoma through the Arklatex, Arkansas here into Missouri. With that heavier rain, on these won't be severe, but it'll still be producing some flooding rains. But on the northwest side of there, that's where the snow is going to be flying. So you're going to be moving from storms into Iowa on Saturday to some snow by the time we get into late Sunday time frame. And that snow will be shifting into portions of Missouri here, as well as going back into portions of in and around Chicago area, with the south side experiencing those kind of heavier, if not almost flooding rains. But to the south of there, we could be looking at possibly an additional setup for more severe weather as we get into that late Monday time frame into portions of Louisiana and the Mississippi into Alabama. I think it'll transfer to mostly just a flooding rain, heavier rains, setting up over the Tennessee Valley, getting into Kentucky, portions of West Virginia, and there's where the more snow will be flying in late afternoon into the evening hours on Monday into Illinois, and to portions of Indiana, as well as Ohio here, as this system will be moving across. But there's the severe weather setup to the south of there, into Louisiana, into portions of the southeast, into Mississippi, into Alabama. So now we're talking some severe weather into portions of Tennessee, into portions of Kentucky by the time we get into that Monday time frame. And this will continue to race across. So as we get into that Tuesday, March the 8th, there's your heavier snow will be into portions of upstate New York, getting into Vermont and New Hampshire, as well as into Maine. And then the rain will be on the south side. And as we move through time, there's the wind threat. So we got those pieces of energy but come across. We have that initial setup over California. We've got that second piece of energy right now over Seattle. Those two pieces of energy will dive southward. So it's going to be a very windy and bumpy ride in its path over the next several days, as that active low-level jet will be racing across into Arizona, into New Mexico, into Texas, where there's the heavier, kind of wind swath setup of those 40, 50, outside of that thunderstorm risk, obviously where you have those possible severe thunderstorms, that'll be winds over that 60-mile-per-hour range as we get under that severe threat. But then as the system moves through, then we have another piece of secondary energy coming from the north as that polar vortex kind of elongates and splits again. And that's going to be sending another cold Arctic surge from Canada diving southward as we get into Wednesday, March the 9th, with well below average 20 to 30 degrees below average temperatures coming back into portions of Montana, into the Dakotas, and sending well below average temperatures all the way into the deep south. But underneath that, we got the heavier snow. So March the 10th on Thursday, the heavier snow will be flying under that Arctic air into portions of Wyoming, getting back into Colorado here, into Nebraska. More snow will be flying into portions of the Dakotas, getting back into Minnesota. As these systems to the south of here, you're still going to be in the warm sector. But I am expecting a lot of rain into portions of the southeast, get into the Ohio Valley, and to portions of the mid-Atlantic states. So some of these areas could be looking at some flash flood watches and producing multiple inches of rain over the coming days. But man, this Arctic front means business for the middle of March standards, because by the time we get into that 11th and 12th time frame, it's got plenty of upper air guidance. The 500 millibars on the European and the GFS guidance is almost like verbatim. I mean, I've never seen them just locked, pretty much identical type setup. So this Arctic air is coming and there's nothing to stop it. It is definitely coming. A lot of people may not want it, but it is March and Mother Nature's calls, and we could be, March is a transition month. So it's still technically winter until March the 20th officially. So yeah, we still could get these cold snaps in the month of March, and that's exactly what's going to come with this Arctic air plunging by the time we get into the middle of the week, especially as we get into that Thursday going into Friday time frame, as we'll be approaching into portions of Texas, especially into Oklahoma here, as that cold Arctic air will be plunging south. So by the time you wake up on Friday morning, March the 11th here, here's the temperatures. I mean, you basically have anything in the green shaded areas, that is your below zero temperatures into portions of Minnesota here, getting into through the Dakotas, getting into Wyoming and into Colorado and the higher elevations, but even single digits. I mean, these are low temperatures, guys, into Nebraska, into Kansas, into the teens and Oklahoma, into the Texas Panhandle. I mean, widespread 20s come back into North Texas, into central Texas. I mean, look at the cold air traveling all the way down into portions of Austin. We could be getting a freeze by then. So some of these people have actually even possibly planted the plants and, thinking winter was over and it was safe to do so. But if you did, which I definitely don't advise in places to the south until much later in time, but if you did, you gotta bring those plants in, or they're going to be causing damage. And as that cold air continues to plunge southward, man, look at the teens into Missouri, getting into portions of Arkansas as we get into Friday morning, and that just continues to push south and also east. So by March the 12th on, the following Saturday, yeah, we've got widespread 20s over Texas all the way down really into San Antonio. I'm expecting a freeze all the way down into, the southern portions of Louisiana, all the way down to the coastline for a freeze for the entire state of Louisiana, into Mississippi, into Alabama. We got teens and low 20s in Tennessee, teens and low 20s in Kentucky, teens in Missouri. So we got widespread freezing temperatures for a good chunk of the central U.S. And by the time we just move into that 13th of the middle of the month, March timeframe, this cold air will just continue to actually shift eastward. So then portions of the Northeast will be impacted with this colder air intrusion. So there's your heavier rain setup. So we've got these multiple systems coming across. Most of this will be actually in the form of snow. And then once we get towards the midsection of the country, especially into portions of the Southeast and the Ohio Valley, I'm definitely concerned for not only severe weather, but also those flooding range with multi-inch rains setting up for several days here, as we could be looking at some flash flood watches and definitely some, rising creeks and that area. And so as we look at the ice threat, yeah, there's the ice threat on the initial stage of that first cold air mass. We could be looking at some, slippery slope here into portions of Nebraska, into South Dakota, into Minnesota, through Wisconsin, with kind of an icy mix, kind of just a glaze. This is not like a damaging, crippling ice storm or anything like that, but still, anything at the glaze with 1/10 of an inch on the roadways would cause a lot of concern up here in kind of a treacherous travel as we go throughout the week. But there's your snow. So we have multiple snowstorms coming across with much needed actually snow moving back in the Sierra Nevada, but they haven't really seen much. I mean, you got a lot in December, but it was been very dry for January and February standards. But those heavier snows will be pushing through the Intermountain West and then pushing back into Montana, going back into Wyoming, into the upper elevations of Colorado. So for the ski resorts, they're going to be loving the snow, back into Denver, and these widespread swath of these kind of a blue shaded anywhere from at least 3 to 6 inches, basically from Missouri to Illinois to Indiana to Ohio northward. And we could be looking at some heavier snows with a little bit heavier band as we move through portions of Minnesota as well as Wisconsin. So hey, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video and definitely leave your comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel to catch the latest update where I protect you before and after storm.